All right. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in, and we are still waiting for the bulk of the audience to join in. In the meantime, feel free to grab some drinks or snacks while we are waiting, and we'll be start in a few minutes. Thank you. All right. Once again, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in, and we'll be starting in a few minutes. In the meantime, feel free to grab some drinks or snacks while we are waiting. Thank you. All right, all right. Once again, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Market Access series, where our goal for this series, especially in this episode, is to introduce you to people and ideas that will help you navigate the Hong Kong market. I'm Joel, and this is the Market Series Hong Kong, the fourth in the series of 5 episodes where we discuss market potential, challenges, opportunities, as well as the supports available. We are now way past the midpoint of the series, and thank you if you have been joining us since the first episode. And thank you to those who are joining us here today for the first time as we talk about how you can begin your journey in expanding across Asia. Now, before we start, I just want to go over a few house rules. So the first one is, please do note that this is a panel discussion, and we would like to invite you to join by sharing your thoughts and comments on the topic in the chat widget below. Secondly, the floor is always open to your questions, and do share your questions in the Q&A widget below, and we will get back to it so the panelists can address them at the end of the panel discussion. And lastly, with the first two house rules in mind, please know that the webinar is recorded and will be shared with all of you via email so you can view it afterwards. And with all of that out of the way, we just want to make sure, like, where are you coming from? So we will be launching a poll on your screen now, where the first question is, when are you planning to Hong Kong? So we have there this year, within the next year, or still planning. So we'll be giving you a few minutes to share your thoughts and feedbacks on the question. So I think this is a really interesting question to point out, like, when are you planning to expand to Hong Kong? So in the previous webinars that we've had, there are people who are planning to expand within this year, and there are some people who are still planning, which is really helpful because so we'll be touching more on this with the panel discussion with our panelists later as well. And the second question is, what other challenges do you see entering the Hong Kong market? So part of, like, market expansion, like, there for sure there are a lot of challenges that you will be facing. So we have here some of the most pressing challenges that we think that you may be facing. We have product market fit, understanding the market, hiring of local talents, logistics, and management. And we'll be giving this a few more seconds before we close. But it looks like for the first one, when you're planning to expand to Hong Kong, it looks like there are a few people who are planning to expand to Hong Kong this year, and there are more people who are still in the planning phase. So that is good. That is good. And for the second question, uh, what other challenges do you see entering the Hong Kong market? So I'm sharing the results here with you, so you can also see, like, what's the dynamics of the audience that we have here today. yeah, so most of them are, understanding the market. So that's a really good thing to point out, because that is what we'll be touching more on also for this webinar. And that's it for the polls. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts with us and for giving us an idea on where you are coming from. And again, with all of that out of the way, I would like now to pass the floor to our moderator, Dennis. So Dennis is an experienced director with the demonstrated history of working in the government administration industry, skilled in accounting, tax, corporate legal, corporate structure, advisory, corporate governance, and cross-border structuring matters. So please help me in welcoming our moderator for today, the CEO and founder of Legacy, Mr. Dennis Poe. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Joel. Thanks for the introduction. Oh, okay. So I think he just showed the time to me. And that thank you everyone for attending. So I just want to start by by saying that get ready your pens and pencil or like your papers. There's we are halfway through the market access series, and what I have learned from the past the series is that there's a lot of information, wonderful information and data points, right? For you to understand, of course, due to the poll result, I think we're all here to learn and understand like what exactly, how does it work in the Hong Kong market. So I think it'll be very, very helpful. You've got a pen and a paper, right, to note down all this, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'll be introducing the panelists, and I'm going by, like one by one, to let the panelists introduce themselves. We get to hear straight off from the panelists. And that from there we will then go into the talking sessions, the panel discussion, asking some of the most common asked questions with regards to expanding into Hong Kong. And then lastly, I'll put up the questions to the Q&A to the floor. So feel free to just post your question up. We will address that after 35 minutes of our panel discussion, and lastly we'll close out with 5 minutes. So I thought giving you the agenda first, and then from there, let me start by introducing the panelists. So I would like to introduce you to Mr. Arshad Chowdhury. He's the managing partner of Betatron, and basically, it's like an investment venture arm in Hong Kong. So Arshad, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Dennis. So I am the managing partner of Betatron Venture Group, and we are a Hong Kong-based VC fund, and we invest in early stage B2B tech companies across Asia, excluding mainland China. And we invest in startups that are digitizing traditional industries like logistics or healthcare, maritime shipping, real estate. And so when we're considering investments, something that we do a little bit differently than a lot of other VCs is that we take into account the reality of climate change. So we try to understand which companies are poised to succeed and thrive, given that climate change is already here and that the impacts are already being felt across Asia and that they're only going to intensify. So that's my background. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Arshad. Wow, that's very clear. Like an introduction that you're looking at climate change. I think that's great, right? So any of you that's into this, right, later, please do ask questions, because you have Arshad here. He'll be the best person to answer you on that. Arshad, just by the way, before we move on to the next panelist, so quick one. What do you, I thought it was like something personal, right? And nice to go. What do you think you experienced the best over the last week? Anything. Could be a food, could be, experience and stuff. I'm gonna ask anyone the same question.
Oh, okay, sure. I mean, I'm happy to say we are launching our next fund, which is Fund 4. And, we thought it would take a long time to raise this fund, but our first close was at a certain dollar mark, but we passed it in less than a week. And so we've had to expand how much we're going to be raising on that front. And I think it just speaks to both the the thesis that we're working on and also the optimism, despite all the sort of like uncertainty and bad news in the world that we hear about in the news. I think underlying all of it are some really massive trends that Asia is growing fast. Trade between Asia continues to grow quickly. There are young people who are connected digitally and want to do things differently, who are now stepping into the driver's seat of their businesses, and that's the type of trend that we're investing in. So I would say having to expand our first close is probably the good news that we had this past week.
Wow, within 1 week, that's amazing. Thank you, Arshad, for that introduction. I'll next move the introduction to Miss Jayne Chan. So Jayne is the head of Start Me Up Hong Kong, which is under Invest Hong Kong. Basically part of the government, arm towards the venture hours, right? So Jayne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. And can I just say a big thank you to E27 for inviting me to speak here today. It's a real pleasure to be here. Invest Hong Kong is a government department helping overseas companies to establish here in Hong Kong. And we have over 30 offices around the world, including in Singapore, in Thailand and Indonesia and other locations as well. So if you're ever looking for support, please do reach out to us. In terms of the kind of advice and support we give, is that it ranges from very pragmatic information on how do you register a company, how do you open a bank account, how do you apply for work visas, to actually giving more, I think, of value, which is connecting companies to important networks and connections, also inviting you to various events so you can actually meet more potential customers and potential investors. And we also support in terms of marketing and PR once you're actually located here to announce you as well. I specifically look after the startup sector, so a team called StartmeupHK, and I look after the startups themselves, obviously, but also the other kind of stakeholders such as investors, the corporate innovation folks, the academics involved with the startup side. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Jayne. Also, the same question to you. Anything you experienced great about like last week?
It could be personal or professional, yes.
Can be.
Anything. Actually, I'll talk a little bit more probably about the StartmeUp Festival. We've had to postpone our festival, which was supposed to run in May this year, to September. And, there was a lot of juggling we had to do. And,
Wow.
last week was where we confirmed a lot of the various speakers who had agreed to speak in May. Suddenly we're asking them to change to a new schedule, and these people coming from all over the world. So a lot of that was being confirmed, and we also had a lot of the sponsors who are staying with us as well. So very pleased about that.
Wonderful. Wow. I mean, it seems like everyone is busy over the last week. It must be. So, okay, the next question, the next panelist that I would like to introduce you to is Mr. Charles Ferguson. He's the General Manager, Asia Pacific of Globalization Partners. So, Charles, to you.
Hey, thanks a lot. And as my colleague said, thank you so much for E27 helping us to coordinate and arrange this. It's a great opportunity to share some ideas and some experiences around the effervescence in all these different markets. And certainly Hong Kong has got so much going for it. We're going to dive into that today. My position, as you stated, I'm the GM for this company called Globalization Partners, which is a business that exists specifically to help companies to hire talent in countries where they have no physical presence or no legal presence. So if you wanted to expand into a market and hire some local folks to kind of get started, you would use our compliant vehicle locally to get you up and running and allow for compliant hiring and all the accoutrements associated with that. Additionally, other ways we're often leveraged from a service perspective is you might not have any interest in the particular market at all per se, but you find incredible talent and you want to compliantly hire that talent and attract and retain that talent. So we have a lot of really interesting use cases, and certainly Hong Kong is a phenomenally key market for expansion across the entirety of Asia Pacific. And we're gonna, as I said, peel that back. To preempt you, you wanted to ask a wonderful experience. I think, if I'm not I don't want to like sort of like cut myself up too fast, but I think I might have witnessed the last Easter egg hunt that my kids will go on this weekend, because they're at that age where Easter Bunny might not be exactly as Dad described. So we had it. It was fun. It was a beautiful experience. They found all the eggs, nothing rotted outside in the tropical Singapore sun. So it was a great photo op for me, but probably one of the last ones. So it was one to remember, that's for sure.
Great. Thanks, Charles, for the sharing.
Yeah.
I know I'm currently in UK. Easter is like Great Easter is definitely the things that's going on here for the holiday season.
Oh, for sure.
So
Huge.
yeah, so I see everywhere, right? It's lovely. So
You find any Easter eggs, Dennis?
yeah, no.
Well, we're going to provide
thinking
Easter
bunch
eggs
of-
in this conversation today. Everyone gets one to take away. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's on Charles. Okay. Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Charles. We can get started with the panel discussion. I'll be asking a few common asked questions, I'll say, and I'll basically go around the panelists on these questions. And that, like I say, feel free to put up your question in the Q&A if you wanted to know more about certain topics and stuff like that. Okay, so I'm gonna get the panel discussion started. The first question, which I would like to put it to Jayne first, is why should company consider expanding to Hong Kong?
Well, I think, why expand to Hong Kong? We have the fundamentals here. I think any company who is looking to expand to any overseas market will be looking for a few things. They'll be making sure that there is actually the sales opportunity there, that you've also got the talent, and potentially if you're a startup, the funding is also there. So for us, the access to talent, to market, as well as to funding is available. So when we're drilling down a little bit more into each one of these areas, when we're talking about access to market, we are obviously talking about Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong is a population of 7.4 million. So it's a limited kind of market, but it's a great place to potentially, test your products, your services within a very sophisticated, tech-savvy kind of audience. I noticed one of the questions with the poll with regards to challenges was finding that market fit, the product market fit. And I think Hong Kong is a great place to potentially do that. Especially if you're coming from slightly further away than Asia, it's a great place to work with an international kind of group. But then you've also got the GBA as well, which is that cluster of 11 cities within southern China, which also includes Hong Kong and Macau, the special administrative regions. Now that's a market of 86 million people. And to get to that market of 86 million people, you can take a high-speed train and go on a train for 14 minutes, 14 minutes. It's actually a very compelling reason to actually look into something. Again, very tech savvy. There's a cluster of tech giants there, which means that you get that spillover effect of, audiences and people who are very, comfortable with technology, who embrace it. So there's that kind of market, and of course, by extension, through the GBA to the rest of mainland China and through Asia as well. So that market is there. The access to funding, in addition to government kind of funding, there's also a lot of investors ranging right from the seed area through to IPOs, and we'll drill into that a little bit later as well. But I also wanted to mention the talent side of things. It's also incredibly important. Hong Kong has 5 of the QS top universities, QS ranking universities here, and top 100 universities. So even though talent is still a challenge, as it is any tech hub around the world, I think if you look at the quality of our talent, it's excellent, and I'm sure Charles can potentially testify to this. But aside from these sort of fundamentals for startups, there's also other basic fundamentals. Hong Kong is a great place to do business. It's got a low tax rate, incredibly international, and lots of different kind of adjunct reasons to potentially consider.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Jayne, for the really quite a general, it's like quite a good sum up, like an introduction about Hong Kong's market, right? And what I find particularly interesting is, of course, you mentioned about access to talent. So I'm rather curious about that portion also, and I did like to hear from Charles. Of course, we do see a few more points about like the market size and also like the investment scene, which of course later we'll jump into on this topic with Arshad in a short while. So Charles, I wanted to point to you first that on the question, why should companies consider expanding to Hong Kong, especially on what Jayne just mentioned about, which is on the talent portion, right? Is there anything you would like to share about that?
On talent specifically, I mean, I certainly agree with Jayne's positioning around the education system in Hong Kong. It is a massive progenitor of some remarkable concentration of talents, particularly in some areas that are extremely germane to companies that are looking to set up kind of an epicenter or a hub for the entirety of this region. When you think about things like access to research and development talent, anything, frankly, that is sort of schematically related to STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics types of education, from about late 2019 into early 2020, the government became extremely focused on launching a sort of a technology and talent pipeline exercise, even to the point where they created a STEM internship scheme, which encourages STEM students to gain experiences around innovation and technology related work. And it's raising the local labor force's level of technology and enablement. So when you think about those, and Jayne also mentioned the GBA, which for folks who might not be completely across that, that's the Greater Bay Area, which is all of these remarkable hubs of different types of acumen. You'll find like discrete and electrical engineering and manufacturing. You'll find massive concentrations of fintech and software development and hardware development, like in Shenzhen as an example. All of these areas, and they're all remarkably connected. I mean, back in the day, you took a ferry and you had to go cross through all these different sorts of immigration processes, et cetera, ad nauseum. Today, it's extremely streamlined. So it's remarkable. Basically, Hong Kong just became like, 11 times bigger than it used to be, which is pretty remarkable. On that topic, and then I'll pass the baton over to my colleague. It is, it's the three rules of business expansion around location, right? Location, location, location. Strategically, Hong Kong is phenomenal. It sits basically smack dab in the middle. That's a technical term, smack dab, in the middle of the entirety of this region. And if you think about it from a lot of different sort of businesses, if you have a follow the sun methodology, you've got Hong Kong sitting right in the middle of sort of the end of the workday in Europe, UK, let's say, as an example, and the beginning on the other side of in North America. So there's a real easy sort of progression of work that can transfer around, and there's like 160 plus banks registered in Hong Kong. So and I'm sure my colleagues can speak ad nauseum about all the various flavors of financial services that are ubiquitously entrenched in the Hong Kong market. And thus there's a host of different types of talent that are around not only those core services, those core institutions, but the ancillary services that support those institutions. So, Arshad will speak about this in a moment because of his particular focus on digital transformation and disruption of more traditional industries. There are a ton of traditional industries in Hong Kong. There's a lot of innovation as well, but there are a lot of companies that have yet to raise their hand around digitization. And while we might talk about that in a few minutes around that being a challenge, it's a crazy opportunity, because if you come in with your vision and your services and your approach, you can take some things that work beautifully well in your local market, bring them into the Hong Kong market, and have a completely green field to play in with effervescent and very ambitious talent to engage with to help you do that. And not to mention, and Jayne will speak to this, but government policies and programs to expedite that disruption. So it's a virtuous cycle. Back to you.
Yes, Thanks, Charles. And thanks for leading the questions already. I was going to ask those questions anyway. So Arshad, and that's to you specifically, right? The question is, what business opportunities are available for startups for expanding to Hong Kong, right? As Charles mentioned, I think you're the right person to ask about this question, right? So Arshad, do you like to share more?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in our own portfolio, we've seen successes in B2B companies that are operating across a wide range of industries, even here in Hong Kong. But in Hong Kong specifically, I think alluding to what Charles just said, from corporate services to logistics to hiring and training platforms, like Hong Kong is really ripe for finding customers along these lines because of the nature of the community. So there are many established but traditional paper-based and family-run businesses that are eager to modernize. And we're seeing many times the managers who we're meeting with who are buying decisions around SaaS products are maybe second or even third generation managers who are in their 30s, who are younger, they're taking the helm and they want to really see a transformation in their business. So if you can save these companies money, or give them an edge, or even make them even a tiny bit more, you'll find a welcome audience here. Now, something else that's really interesting, I think, about Hong Kong is the mindset of folks here, because it is quite international. And they don't really hold it against you if you're coming from outside of Hong Kong with a SaaS solution for their business. Actually, that can be thought of as a validation if you've successfully deployed your products in other markets and now you're extending to Hong Kong. I also see people in Hong Kong much more, I think, comfortable with working with international companies in a way that, say, New York companies might not be. If you're a French company operating in Paris trying to sell services to a New York-based business, good luck unless you have a New Yorker on the ground. That's not necessarily the case here in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Arshad, for that. I think you raised a very good point about this is a very common question, common sort of challenge when you talk about certain market being more open to globalized businesses. And of course, there are some market that's just how it is, right? Like localization is the only way to go. So, so I thought, I mean, of course, we are all progressing towards opening up, right? But then the thing is, in any case, it's going to take a while, right? So why not get your hand into Hong Kong and then really get started quick and, quick and easy. And I think that is very comforting to hear, of course. And there's, what I hear from the panelists is there's the new mindset, but there's still old businesses that can tap into digitalization. So I think there's a wonderful opportunity here with here. So I wanted to then, since we talk about opportunities, right? I wanted to then start comparing a little bit here. We speak about global versus localization, and Hong Kong very much welcome globalization kind of businesses. But I thought of putting to Jayne. This is quite interesting question. I personally find it I think Arshad has really shared about the specific opportunities here, right? But how do you think it differs from Hong Kong market and the other markets? Just want to take your point about it.
Yeah, I think, Arshad mentioned that international mindset. Actually, that is a big thing about Hong Kong. I literally have traveled to, I was counting the other day how many cities I've been to, and there's been quite a few. A lot of these are, very big cities as well. But I truly haven't seen a place really as international as Hong Kong. It is that the fact that we are one of the world's financial centers, but a very small kind of place, so everything's quite compressed. So the opportunities to meet all these different kind of nationalities and to work alongside them is actually very high. So I think, for companies outside of Hong Kong looking to potentially leverage opportunities, there is that feeling of, if you can basically make your products and services work elsewhere and then, bring it here, as Shad mentioned, it's actually, people are very receptive to that. But it's also a good way if you're actually trying to, localize your products maybe to the northern part of Asia, to mainland China, if that's one of your priorities. Now, Hong Kong is a great kind of test lab, I think, for something like that. If you're coming from a lot of the other kind of overseas countries, and maybe you've heard it culturally, the mainland mainland kind of market is very different from everyone else. And, you know, it's almost said in the same breath as like potentially Japan is. It's actually a different culture, a different way of doing things. So Hong Kong is a good way to tap into that kind of, you know, switching your products to potentially meet some of those cultural requirements, but in a very kind of international kind of basis. And then you can take it to the GBA to basically to develop more and make it appropriate for those kind of markets if mainland China is one of your, you know, basically areas to prioritize. So there's that, but it's you know, when you're talking about the real business opportunities that come in Hong Kong and nowhere else, I think, you know, we've got to look at the financial services market. It's already been mentioned before, we are one of the world's financial centers, which means that, you know, if you're in the fintech side, if you're targeting those number of financial institutions and all those ancillary kind of support functions that comes with fintech, you know, the opportunities here are big, and actually we punch above our weight in terms of, you know, the size of the city and the number of companies here. The business to business opportunities here in fintech is massive. And that's why, you know, we did a fintech survey last year, and we noticed more than 600 plus fintechs are based in Hong Kong. And when we look into the context of the whole startup ecosystem, which is slightly different from this fintech survey, which also looks at corporates as well, fintech is like the top basically industry sector that people are involved in. So, you know, if you're looking to potentially reach a very international, very savvy kind of audience, Hong Kong does offer that in terms of fintech. And I mentioned already the GBA opportunities. And I think the other thing that differentiates us is that individually you can look at things and maybe, you know, another city has this, city X has the same number of like financial institutions. You've got others who are very international. But I think it's very hard to find a location that has all of these different characteristics encapsulated within a city in a very business kind of friendly environment. And I think that's actually quite a differentiating factor as well, you know, amongst other areas.
I see. Thank you, Jayne, for that. I think it's very interesting. Of course, it seems like a very good launch pad towards the other markets, right? It's definitely one. But also at the same time, it can actually allows you to tap into such a big opportunity in Hong Kong itself, right? So it's like, wow, it's like really a two sides of getting two sides of the benefits, right? Which is wonderful. I think that's great. I think it's good that you mentioned about that, like how that the audience can understand how the market then differs, right? The opportunities that differs. And that actually brings me to the next question, which is towards, I wanted to bring to Charles, and especially talk about opportunities. And there's this thing that we can work towards, either going into as a launchpad to a new market, or you know, developing further in Hong Kong itself. And Charles, I want to ask you this question about like, what are these? Is there any challenges to consider when expanding to Hong Kong?
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to this in my little long-winded preamble, but I'll add a little bit more color to it. I think anyone who has tried to establish their business in Hong Kong realizes that from a company formation point of view, it is remarkably well designed and remarkably streamlined. So, you know, what you might immediately think of in terms of maybe a checklist of what you want to prepare yourself for as you go and enter into a new market, like everywhere else in the world, there are a wealth of resources available to you to tap into various talent pools, but there's also a hell of a lot of demand for that talent. So there are gaps that need to be addressed in different ways and approaches by which you can address those gaps. Similarly, as I mentioned, it's very easy to establish an entity or a structure in Hong Kong, but anyone who would speak the truth, hand on heart, would tell you that it's extremely difficult to open up a bank account in Hong Kong. Now, that is something that is being aggressively addressed by the government, and they're peeling back a lot of the challenges that heretofore were very frustrating and making it a lot more streamlined, a lot more easy for people to establish their financial presence. A lot of that sort of process and sort of policy that's in place that makes it less streamlined than perhaps experiences in other countries is predominantly predicated on the fact that because it is such an important and significant financial services hub, there is a litany of extra anti-money laundering, KYC, know your customer process that needs to be gone through in order to establish the veracity and the credibility of the business that you're establishing there in order to start to do trade on the financial systems. Having said that, necessity being the mother of invention, this is one of the progenitors of why we have such a robust fintech environment in Hong Kong. So there's a lot of digital disruption that's happening. There was an RFP several years ago, like 4 years ago, put out by the HKMA, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, specifically focused on with the major banks like StanChart and HSBC, et cetera, ad nauseum, involved in trying to disrupt themselves from an account opening process, particularly around AML and KYC, and digitally sort of provide for that. And that's gone in a really positive direction. So there's a challenge with that. I did mention this earlier as well from a challenging point of view that for such a robust and innovative economy, many of the traditional businesses in Hong Kong are still extremely slow to adopt digital technology. And so whilst I said this earlier, whilst that is a challenge, it's also a massive opportunity. So for companies to come in and kind of bring that insight and disruption in there. The tax rate across the board in Hong Kong is one of the lowest in Asia, certainly, if not on the freaking planet. So it's a really favorable place to do some different types of work. Having said that, the laws around taxes they're not opaque, but they're obtuse. So it's you need to have someone, don't think you're going to do some internet MD self-prognosis and go in there and like figure out how to navigate the tax structures. You need to have a partner to help you to do that. So those would be some of the things I would suggest. Additionally, English is a very, very predominant language for doing business in Hong Kong. There are verticals or areas of industry where English will be great, but it would be to your advantage to have either Cantonese or Mandarin on your bench when it comes to engagement with different types of suppliers or vendors, or even to some extent different parts of the government. Again, I preface all that by saying that English is the preferred business language in the territory, but regardless, language can be a bit of a challenge. It needs to be, considered. But other than that, it's pretty easy, man. There's about a century of history behind people going into Hong Kong and creating amazing businesses. So it's not their first rodeo, that's for sure.
Thank you, Charles, for addressing this. So I'd like to take the question a little bit like on a different side. We talk about opportunities. We talk about what we see in the market in Hong Kong and stuff like that. I wanted to throw one very a curveball here and actually throw it towards Arshad. With regards to the question about fundraising. So we mentioned about fundraising, right? Jayne has mentioned that the investments landscape, it does cover from seed all the way to IPO. I think that's quite right here, but I mean, we want to hear more about it, right? What does the fundraising landscape in Hong Kong look like for startups? Arshad?
Yeah, thanks. I think Jayne did say, I think she described it correctly in describing its diversity and that there are funding opportunities at various levels. I mean, Hong Kong is an important regional player when it comes to funding Asia's startups. So between Hong Kong and Singapore, you just see so much activity. And the landscape, I would describe as a mix of formal and informal processes. So our fund, Betatron, doesn't rely on warm introductions. Any startup in the world really can come to us for funding. And that is the case for many of the established VC funds here. We're comfortable making investments, at least for my fund, without ever meeting face to face. But the angel community, especially here in Hong Kong, often requires more personal introductions. And that's a more informal channel. And that is where there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of capital, a lot of independently wealthy individuals here who are willing to write checks. But it requires you to be here in person generally to get those introductions and close those deals. And the other thing about fundraising here is that while there's a lot of money here in Hong Kong, you'll want to make sure that the business that you're pitching matches the appetite of investors. And that's true anytime you're pitching, but Hong Kong is a little bit like New York culturally, in that investors here are focused on the business model. They ask questions like, how do you make money? Do the unit economics make sense? What's your burn rate? What's your runway? And this market has less appetite than, say, Silicon Valley for making really creative or consumer-facing long-term platform plays like Twitter or Facebook. And I find that to be a common challenge for founders who are working on something really big and maybe consumer-facing and not immediately monetizable. So one exception to this, though, might be crypto projects. There's actually more money than good deals in the crypto space right now. So if you're a founder with a promising blockchain-based business or doing a coin-based offering, I mean, Hong Kong is an important important market to consider raising money from, because there's a lot of excitement. A lot of investors are diving right into owning their own NFTs. A lot of people, across the board, across probably more so in other markets. You don't have to be super wealthy to own crypto here. A lot of people own fractional ownerships of Bitcoin and are watching that market every day, just like they do in the stock market.
Wow. Arshad, that's a very interesting insight you have. I think a lot of people would not have known that. I didn't know that, so I thought that was quite interesting. And it's for the audience, it's a good sort of like something to look forward to that also. In any case, they're in the business of like cryptocurrency and stuff like that. That's wonderful. So I thought I did like to, now we are almost halfway through the session, right? I thought I want to bring back about the poll itself. The question about the poll was, when you plan to expand to Hong Kong, and what are the challenges basically what are the challenges you face, right? And I do see that there's quite a bit of the audience that is still planning, 63%. And for the top two concern that they have is actually about finding product market fit is 25%, and understanding market is for 75%. And I think that is quite a sight to see, right? That we have very high numbers inclined towards still planning and understanding market. And I thought I'd bring to Jayne about this, right? Is that Jayne, you really like to share about probably share some strategy that the companies can scale in Hong Kong, quick and effective. And of course, how Invest Hong Kong can help is definitely very helpful to share about. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it was very interesting to find out, so many of the people who responded to the poll mentioned the fact that understanding the market was actually, such a major challenge. It surprises me because I just think of Hong Kong as being such an international kind of city that a lot of people would understand things about it. But I think, we've had this pandemic, and of course that's thrown out curveballs left, right and center. But one of the good things that really has come out from that is the fact that so many events have been turned into a virtual platform. We're on this virtual platform now, and I think events actually is a great way for people to actually start understanding a market, knowing what's being discussed, seeing what's been talked as challenges, how to resolve them, what are other founders' journeys been like, what can you learn from that? And I think with the virtual kind of conferences and that kind of platform has enabled people to come from all over the world. You don't have to fly here anymore to attend some really top-notch events, and some that are really deep into a specific industry sector, or something that's much wider that might be more sort of generic kind of advice. And I think that is a great way to potentially understand more about the market. The other things, of course, is just try and leverage those networks, that you're bound to have. You're bound to know someone who has some kind of network in Hong Kong. You can reach out to the likes of us, Invest Hong Kong. We can actually connect you to quite a few people. Don't dismiss the chambers and consulates as well. I find startups actually very seldomly take advantage of the consulates and the chambers. And actually, we have chambers and consulates reaching out to us all the time, asking us, a specific question for one of their startups or companies back in their respective countries, can they get us a connection to a specific person? And so the consulates and chambers, and more active ones, can provide a ton of support. And I sort of like, I see that as something that should be leveraged more. So the events, networks, chambers, and also just a way of actually really, hitting the ground running. I think it's, as Charles mentioned, is to hire someone on the ground first, actually, to see whether there is that product market fit, or, there is that business kind of opportunity, especially at the moment where the COVID rules, the social distancing still means that currently people who are not permanent residents can't travel into Hong Kong, but you can certainly hire someone on the ground in Hong Kong and start doing some of that business development work and find out where you actually have to tweak your products and services so you can actually really meet the requirements and expectations of the market here. So lots of things you could be doing, and just think a little bit outside of your own immediate kind of circle to see what other kind of services out there. I mean, certainly if you're looking for funding or trying to, understand whether you can apply to an accelerator or incubator, there are SME centers here in Hong Kong that has been specifically set up to advise you on areas like funding, what you can apply for and how much you can apply for and what that process is. So just do a little bit of research and take advantage of the fact that under this COVID situation, there's still lots of things that are available on a virtual level, and that can really help to streamline the process for you.
Thank you, Jayne, for that. I think you shared very interesting insight that it's not only in Hong Kong but like globally, right? That actually you're right. I also realized that a lot of startups don't go to the to the consulate, to the chambers and stuff. I mean, probably it's because people don't really know how to go about it, or it's just a connection question, right? I mean, of course, probably I leave that to E27. It can be the ambition to connect the dots, like just how we're doing now. I feel we are the first steps towards making such changes, right? So thanks for sharing that, Jayne. So I think the next question I thought of addressing to is to Charles. Before, we then quickly start. We need to start looking into the Q&A soon, because I think we're gonna run a bit behind time. But the thing is, I just want to bring the question towards Charles that what Jayne has shared about the the opportunities to on the ground hire people and make things work, right? I thought that's very interesting point to look at. With the limitation to travel, that is definitely a challenge. What is your thoughts on that, Charles?
Look, I would highly advocate, I think Arshad said this earlier as well, that regardless of whatever market you're going into, your best bet to realize the highest amount of, I've used this before with you, Dennis, the TTV, right? The time to value key performance indicator, is to have local talent on the ground. It is indeed the case when you think about what's happened over the past, 24 plus months in Hong Kong. Whilst there is a continual engine of talent being pumped into the local market, the domestic market, as is the case in many markets around this region particularly, there's been a complete turn off of the spigot with respect to inbound talent, right? Borders are shut, or people aren't super stoked to do 21 days of quarantine in some places, right? So when you take out the influx of new blood coming into the system, and there's a relatively steady, albeit not as massive amount of volume of local talent, that means the pool is getting starting to decline. This is a short-term phenomenon. This is not forever. So anything that people have read about around the demise of the credibility and viability of this market, as an example, being a future-proof location for businesses, are way off the mark. And you know what? It's keep the secret. Get into Hong Kong as quickly as you can to take advantage of the incredible opportunities that are there, and let all the people who are like believing what they hear in the rumor mill go down their own path. But the point of the matter is that you have to be prepared And I've said this before in our discussions as well, Dennis, that proper preparation prevents poor performance. And that approach to doing your homework before you enter into the market has everything to do with what Jayne just shared with respect to, the chambers and the consulates, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also around the fact that, you've got an unbelievable amount of accelerators and incubators in Hong Kong that you can reach out to and tap into, who have vast networks into talent. Universities, unbelievable universities, some of the best in the world happen to be in Hong Kong. And those master's programs and those unions, you can reach out to them and start to tap into the talent pool early. And lastly, I would suggest that if you start to decide and define what aspects of business you want to have on the ground in Hong Kong, you can start to look at the jobs to be done and find other areas around the region or around the world where you can tap into talent that can provide for those processes. They could be automation processes, they could be different types of sales functions, et cetera, that aren't time zone dependent. And that's where you need a vehicle that can allow you to tap into that talent and hire compliantly. And one of those models is an EOR, but there are huge amounts of new ideas around how to enter into markets. You don't have to go the traditional route every single time. In Hong Kong, as Arshad alluded to earlier, as did Jayne, Hong Kong market is very pragmatic, very professional and buttoned up, but it's also super open-minded when it comes to new. Bring us something new, prove that the model has viability and can work, and it's embraced. This is what's kept Hong Kong relevant for over a century.
Thank you, Charles. I think that's a very good insights towards Hong Kong's opportunity, right, to then go into other markets and stuff like that. I think it's very important to address that. And without further ado, Arshad, I'm not forgetting you, by the way. I know I'm riding bicycles, right? But the thing is, definitely tight with time, and there's really, I would say, very hot questions that are coming from the audience. So I thought of quickly addressing that first. So yes, so I'll bring to the Q&A session now, and that I see very interesting questions that is being mentioned. Of course, now I wish to address to Arshad about this question about this saying that I hear that Hong Kong has 10 times in terms of progress. Just curious, what's the most pressing tech or startup currently in Hong Kong? I think you are the best person to answer this.
Oh, wow. That's a really challenging question to answer. I can speak broadly about my own portfolio and what we're seeing here. I probably won't name any names in terms of the hottest companies, because every company has its strengths and weaknesses, and valuations today are so high that that can be a false indicator of a successful company. So I think it's fairly broad. 10x in terms of progress. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but I do see Hong Kong being a dark horse in the race to modernize massive industries like shipping, like maritime shipping. And I think logistics broadly is a space where we're seeing some real winners emerge within shipping, and then also in other areas of related to logistics. So one of the challenges that we talked about today is, how do companies expand rapidly to multiple countries around the world? And companies like one that we recently that we support called GenHub, based here in Hong Kong, has realized that one of the fastest growing trends in e-commerce is direct to consumer sales. And so if you're a small direct to consumer seller selling stuff over Etsy or other platforms like Shopify, well, you have to deal with warehousing your products. You've got to deal with returns, oftentimes in multiple countries around the world. So what GenHub and other players are trying to do is simplify that process of managing your global inventory, even if you're a small mom and pop shop selling direct to consumers, because today with the internet, you're able to enter many markets instantaneously. So how do you do that while maintaining high quality? So I think logistics broadly continues to be a really incredible space to look at. I mean, this is the home of Lalamove, a massive unicorn emerging out of Hong Kong, and we're seeing more and more. I mean, some of the fastest growing companies in our portfolio have also been related to logistics besides GenHub. So very broadly, I would say there's a huge opportunity in logistics and also a very big opportunity in maritime shipping that fewer people are aware of.
Wow, Arshad, thank you for this. I think this is the cheat answer towards getting quick into Hong Kong now. So any new startups, you should look into that if you're interested in Hong Kong, right? So that's great. Thank you for the answer, Arshad. So I did like to then start addressing, right? I think the first question is quite interesting. Is it safe to assume that Hong Kong is a good place to do some product check, prototyping, and check of solution? Maybe I would bring the question to Jayne about testing product, right? About prototyping, about checking out the solution. Is Hong Kong a good place to do so?
We've always suggested companies from overseas who are want to tap into mainland China and other parts of Asia actually to leverage Hong Kong for exactly this. I mentioned before, we've got a discrete kind of size of market. So with 7.4, 7.5 million people, very tech savvy, very open to newness, as some of the other my fellow panelists have mentioned. So it is a very good location to actually adjust and tweak some of those things. I mean, I think in terms of like, somewhere to bring something and completely change it here, maybe not as cost-effective way to do it. But if you were, having a good SaaS model or other kind of hardware kind of products that are working elsewhere, but you just basically wanted to change it. So the features, for example, are much more geared towards what people are looking for here. I think Hong Kong is indeed a really good place to actually, do those kind of testing and tweaking. And as I mentioned, it's a good way to go into the sort of like the Greater Bay Area market of 86 million people by basically addressing some of those kind of those kind of features and things here.
I see. Thank you, Jayne. Thanks for that. I mean, this question not exactly too easy to answer also actually. So great. Yeah. So the next question I bring to Charles is actually a few questions that sounds that you can just address that by one go. Is actually about how Globalization Partners can assist the audience right here into setting up base in Hong Kong, help to localize, and any program that you have from the Globalization Partners to help them.
Yeah, there's a few options. I mean, if you haven't found talent yet and you're looking for talent, we do have a solution called GP Recruit. We don't do sourcing or talent search as a business. That's not what we do. But we have a curated ecosystem of highly reputable and qualified and certified partners that we work with that do search. Typically, they are specialized in particular areas as well. So if you were looking for like data scientists, we would have a solution for you where we would connect you, and through a concierge service, we introduce you to the providers. You would be able to engage with them directly, go out and find your talent. And once found, we would help you to onboard that talent onto our global employment platform, make sure they're paid properly and have the right benefits, et cetera. And you can go from there. We do that, all over the world, but certainly in Hong Kong, I think that'd be a very appropriate approach. I want to highly advocate that absolutely you can bring talent from your own market and put it into a local jurisdiction. People do that every day, and we help to facilitate that. But there is no true substitution for having someone who's on the ground with their, breathing the air, their ear to the ground, understanding the pulse of what's happening in that particular market, not just because of the familiarity, but also because of the fact that you want to have someone who can act as a conduit and connect you to the ecosystem and partnerships. So that, in my view, and all the the hundreds, nay thousands of different types of companies that I engage with on a yearly basis, the word of the year for 2022 moving on is partnership. And as evidenced by the folks that are on this panel with me, whether it be a Betatron or Invest Hong Kong, Legacy, or any of these other businesses, we work together as teams to provide comprehensive services to ensure that you are more successful than you would be going at it alone. And similarly, when you hire locally, you're bringing on, access to a local market, even the cultural nuances that are, it's the Pareto world we operate in, right? It's 80-20. You can come in with 80% confidence, but that 20% last mile of local expertise is what's going to ensure your success. So, embrace the free resources that are available to you and embrace the partnerships that are on hand to ensure that you're successful.
Thank you, Charles. I did see that actually, Jayne, thanks for helping to answer the the question about what kind of programs, right? That InvestHK and Betatron can offer. But I mean, quick one, Arshad, is there any program that Betatron offers to help startup in Hong Kong?
Well, we actually operated a accelerator program for about 4 years, actually 5 years here in Hong Kong, that we recently transitioned out of to be a direct investor as a venture capitalist. So while we at Betatron are working with startups every single day and are evaluating startups every day, we actually don't run any formalized programs outside of the investments we make. But that said, there are, of course, great programs like InvestHK, which are incredible resource for startups. There's also the accelerators that we have a lot of interactions with that include Cyberport and Brink. Now Cyberport offers offices in addition to funding. And I think there's a whole community there. So I think there are quite a few resources here. Now, when I look at, when I think about fund managers like myself, there are also resources for fund managers. Like there's the Innovation and Technology Venture Fund, which is ITVF, that matches investments into startups that have some presence here in Hong Kong. And that's a very powerful incentive for investors who are here to back companies who have important staff here.
Thank you, Arshad. I think that's a very, very good, interesting points also. Like never thought about asking from the, investment managers kind of perspective also, but that's very interesting. Thank you for that sharing. So I did like to close out the session by having each of the panelists to share like a, sort of it could be final advice, could be opinions, could be anything you wish for audience to hear about. And by the way, thank you for thank you to three panelists. That I actually become a lot more about like Hong Kong. There's a lot of perspective I didn't thought I would see, and that it was a great learning lesson for me. Definitely, that's one thing for sure. So, shall I start first with Jayne, with regards to any advice you'd like to give to the audience?
Yeah, I think it's pragmatics. Actually, every time you're looking into going into a new market, you need to do your homework. And with this this age of pandemic still with us and all these facilities available online, I think really try and leverage it as much as you can, as well as organizations such as ours and Invest Hong Kong, or Productivity Council, TDC. All these organizations can potentially support. And I would love for you to invite everyone also to attend the StartmeupHK Hong Kong Festival, which is running from the 5th to the 10th of September. We've got dedicated events focused on blockchain, NFT, gaming, entertainment. We've got sustainability, climate change events, and prop tech, smart cities. So lots of things going on. And if you are looking to try and get a taste of what's happening here in the region and here specifically in Hong Kong, I think that would be a great place to start. So thank you.
Thank you, Jayne, for that advice. And also looking forward to the event. Is it an offline or online event?
Well, we basically pushed it back so we can potentially do a hybrid event. So it will be a certain in-person, fingers crossed that that we can still do this. But hopefully it will be a mix of both virtual as well as face-to-face.
Wonderful. So I hope to see you guys there.
Absolutely.
And yes. So Arshad, would you like to go next?
Yeah. So I think something that we didn't discuss is the quality of life here in Hong Kong. I mean, when you're thinking about moving your business, you should also think about, where you want to be, where you want to live, and where you want to raise your family. And I think for me, I'm originally from the U.S., but I moved here with my family about 4 years ago. And, I didn't realize until I got here that Hong Kong is a beautiful semi-tropical archipelago. And that means beaches and hikes are literally minutes away from world-class dining and nightlife. And I think we definitely have been through a lot between protests and the pandemic. But taking the long view, there are just some intrinsic values of being here in Hong Kong that will really never go away. I mean, it really is a wonderful place to live if you can tolerate the high rents and small apartments. But beyond that, international community, great food, and lots of things to do.
Thank you, Arshad, for that. I think thanks for covering that, something we did not cover also. And then lastly, Charles.
Yeah, look, I'm going to sort of echo what my colleagues have said. I think that the mainstream media has had a field day of sort of beating up on Hong Kong over the past 24 plus months for various reasons. But this period of time, this past 2 years and change, is a blip on the long-term view of the incredible opportunity that exists in Hong Kong. And if folks fall prey to that sort of I won't say it because this is not an appropriate forum, but if folks want to believe the hype, that's fine. But I would suggest to you that there's probably never been a better time to enter into the Hong Kong market, because anytime there's a massive disruption and a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that's when the brave and the ambitious step in and take advantage of the opportunity. And to Arshad's point, I mean, right now the rents are lower than they've been in a really, really, really long time. So get in while you can. And moreover, and this is my last point on this topic, but go. Hong Kong's open for business. So yeah, there are some challenges, and you have to, do a couple of, the hokey pokey and turn yourself around a little. But it's a brilliant time to be getting over there. This is a fantastic time of year to investigate and see what the market has to offer, meet with the people. You'll find a very welcoming and very open environment to expand your business and find great talent. So that'd be my last piece for this topic.
Thank you, Charles, for that. And lastly, of course, I want to thank you, E27, for hosting this event, right? If not, then how could we get such a possible good panelists to actually address your concern about or even like opportunities about like expanding to Hong Kong? So thank you to the panelists also. Thanks for the very insightful experience, like the sharing of the experience and stuff like that. I think that's amazing. I learned a lot, been penning down all the time. So yes, Joel, I'll pass the time to you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Dennis. And to our panelists, thank you so much as well. Let me just open this one for a moment. Okay. So once again, thank you so much to our moderator, to Dennis, and to our panelists. We have Jayne, Arshad, and Charles for the very insightful discussion and for sharing some insights on how foreign startups and businesses can prepare their expansions to Hong Kong and the supports available. And echoing what Dennis shared earlier as well is that I do hope that you prepared your pen and paper to jot down some of the Easter eggs from the discussion. And if you are like me, if you encounter any internet issues in the middle of the web panel discussion, no worries. There is a recording of the panel discussion, and we'll be sharing them with you after this. So once again, thank you so much, Arshad, Jayne, Charles, and Dennis for the very insightful discussion. And I'm sure everyone here learned a lot. And before we close, so during the panel discussion, the panelists also mentioned that one of the challenges in expanding is looking for talents overseas and how technology can play a great role in solving this. So on your screen right now is you may scan the code to visit the link in the chat box as well to know more about how global workforce management is made easy. And once again, to everyone, this is the fourth episode that we have for the Market Access Series. We have one last episode that will happen next week, April 26th, Tuesday, for the Taiwan series. And if you are keen on learning more about the upcoming ones that we in E27 are hosting, feel free to jump into e27.co/events or by signing up for an E27 account to get updated with the daily digest. And once again, Thank you so much for attending, and thank you to our panelists and moderator for the very insightful discussion. Stay safe and see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.